We are today a largely urban population, whereas our ancestors were country dwellers, many people never traveling far from home throughout the whole of their lives. Today we are a shifting population, moving temporarily or permanently from one area to another without much concern. In the past, the people were rooted in their local environment almost as firmly as the trees in the ground, and it would need a great upheaval to move them away to another district. They also moved around largely on foot, and in that way acquired a far more intimate knowledge of their own locality than we can today, traveling in cars, which effectively cuts us off from the outside world. Every tree, stone, mound, stream, river, pool, hill had its place in their environment, and the most unusual features became the focus of tales explaining how they came to be there. Many standing stones were once given devil names, perhaps at a time when Christianity became the predominant religion and many of the earlier sacred sites came to be regarded as the haunt of the devil. In areas of Scandinavian and Saxon influence, names like Grim, Thor, and Woden were sometimes used, as in Grime's Graves from Norfolk. Most devil sites are in England, particularly the south, with a few in Wales and Scotland, whereas places attributed to giants are largely in the west, with very few in central and eastern England, but many in Cornwall and North Wales. Many standing stones were traditionally attributed to giants, also sizable burial chambers and earthworks which had obviously needed great earth-moving efforts in their construction. The names of a hill fort in Gwynedd translates as the Towns of the Giants, and a passage grave on Anglesey in Gwynedd means the giantess's apronal, referring to her having collected an apronal of stones to build on the mound. The giant's grave in Penrith churchyard, Cumbria, in reality Tivo corn crosses dating from around 1,000 and some hogback gravestones. In the same churchyard is a wheel-headed cross called the Giant's Thumb. These names are thought to commemorate a 10th century king who became a legendary hero or giant in local lore. Since the 12th century, Stonehenge has also been called the Giant's Dance in some quarters, and the mighty stones of Callanish in the Western Isles were said to be giants turned to stone for refusing to embrace the Christian religion. Ancient sites, usually cairns or barrows, were often believed to be fairy haunts. In Humberside in the UK is a prominent round barrow which housed a fairy dwelling, seen by a drunken villager late one night. He heard people singing and went to see what it was. Through an open door in the side of the mound, he could see people banqueting at large tables. One of the people saw him and offered him a cup. He took it but threw away the contents, not wishing to come under the spell of the fairies, and ran off with a goblet which was made of an unknown material. This tale was recorded by William of Newburgh in the 12th century. Another tale told of people digging into the mound and finding a golden chest. They tried to pull it out with horses, but it sank back into the mound and no one has been able to recover it. The fairies would sometimes help people by mending broken tools, or would give a reward when helped by humans. In Welsh folklore stories, telling of people who saw the fairies are very common, and some are presented as factual rather than fictional. Indeed, people still claim to see fairies or little people, and these witnesses appear to be neither liars nor insane. Perhaps the little people do still live among us. Famous people, both real and imaginary, were sometimes associated with ancient sites such as a king. King Arthur and other heroes like Sir Bevis of Hampton in southern England, which has a barrow named after him. Because of their air of mystery, and there being no obvious reason for their construction, prehistoric sites have become a focus for a rich and varied folklore. Standing stones and stone circles were sometimes said to be people's turn to stone, often for dancing on a Sunday, such as the Merry Maidens Stone Circle in Cornwall, with the Piper's Standing Stones close by, and the stone circles at Stanton Drew in Avon, or for working in the fields on a Sunday, the Duddow Stones, Northumberland, or for playing the game of hurling on a Sunday, the Hurler Stone Circles in Cornwall, and other similar religious transgressions. Some stones were said to move or go to a nearby stream to drink when they heard the clock strike 12 or the cock crow, or sometimes on a special day of the year, like the Horse Stone at Enstone, Oxfordshire, which goes to drink on Midsummer Eve. Some stones were believed to have the power to return if taken away from their rightful place, like a stone on Cefn Cam Carval in Powys, said to bear the hoofmark of King Arthur's horse Cafal, and which would come back of its own accord if carried away. At a number of stone circles, the stones were believed to be unaccountable. This was said of Stonehenge, the Rollright stones, Long, Meg, and her daughters, the Callanash stones. The same story was told of a few chambered tombs, and when folklorist Leslie Grinsell visited the countless stones near Aylesford in Kent in the late 1940s, he found numbers chalked on the stones showing that the tradition was still alive. Prehistoric stones were often believed to have healing properties, and these sites were regularly visited by the sick, who performed the necessary rituals and thus hoped to be cured. Stonehenge was one such site, as recorded by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century. For in these stones is a mystery and a healing virtue against many ailments, for they washed the stones and poured the water into baths, whereby those who were sick were cured. Moreover, they mixed confections of herbs with the water, whereby those who were wounded were healed, for not a stone is there that is wanting in virtue or leechcraft. People would crawl through whole stones, like the men untold in Cornwall, or pass clothing through smaller holes in stones, as pregnant women did in Ireland in order to ensure a safe childbirth. At the Toothy Stane in Argyll, people with toothache would go and knock a nail or screw into one of the stones of this chambered tomb and expect to gain relief from their pain. Such practices may have developed as a result of people's awe at these strange monuments, but there are other customs which strongly suggest that the rituals originally performed at prehistoric sites had been handed down through the generations, although in a greatly degenerate form. On Orkney, sick people would walk around the stones of Stenness 3 times with the sun, Diesel, and similar rituals were practiced elsewhere, for example at holy wells, as described in more detail in Ahu v Sacred Waters, and sometimes even at Christian churches. In 1650, the Synod of Argyll was trying to stop people walking sun gates around the church before going in for divine service. Whether or not these customs were derived from prehistoric rituals, it's clear that the people of later centuries were much in awe of the prehistoric remains, so much so that they believed it was dangerous to interfere with them, and this belief may well have helped to preserve them to the present day. Anyone digging in a barrow could expect retribution of some kind, and it often came in the form of a thunderstorm or a ghost or ill health or bad luck thereafter following the offender and his family. In 1859, a farmer on the Isle of Man opened a barrow on his land and then sacrificed a heifer in order to prevent the retribution which he clearly expected. Apart from prehistoric sites, other landscape features were also rich in folklore, such as hills and bridges, and the law even extended offshore, in those areas where the sea has in previous centuries inundated the land. This has happened within living memory at Dunwich on the Suffolk coast, and indeed is still happening. The church bells are said to be heard ringing from time to time from beneath the waves. Off the west and north coasts of Wales are said to be areas where the sea has drowned the land. A fertile stretch of land 40 miles long between the Teifi and Bardsley Island, which was defended by the sea by an embankment and sluices. According to the legend, one night in the 5th century, when the keeper of the embankment was drunk, he left the sluices open and the sea broke through, and only a few inhabitants of the 16 cities survived. When the sea is still, it is said that the remains of buildings can be seen through the clear water, and in rough weather the church bells can be heard. The most famous of these sunken lands is of course Lyonesse, said to have extended west from Cornwall as far as the Scilly Isles. It was drowned by the sea in an immense cataclysm in the distant past, a few projecting rocks being all that can now be seen above the surface. The Cornish coast at Lanks End, there once only lay the note legendary land of Lyonesse. Could we speculate that there once could have been not just individuals like Goliath in the Bible, but entire races of gigantic people? There are still giants amongst us today, but most suffer from excess growth hormone and tend to be unhealthy and short-lived. But not always. The tallest man on record is Robert Wadlow of the US. He was 8 foot 11 inches tall and lived only 22 years from 1918 to 1940. The tallest woman is in China. She's 8 foot 1 inch. Some giants have been strongly built, even becoming athletes. Many modern basketball players are around 7 feet in height. A French-Canadian strongman and wrestler was 8 foot 3 inches tall, but only lived 23 years from 1881 to 1904. Argentine wrestler Jorge Gonzalez was 7 feet 7 inches tall. The wrestler Andre the Giant was 7 foot 4 inches and weighed 520 pounds. But like most giants, he suffered with his pituitary gland continuing to produce too much growth hormone even in his adult years. This causes the hands, feet and jaw to grow unusually large and causes a variety of health problems. Entire modern tribes and ethnic groups can be extraordinarily short, like the rainforest pygmies of Africa. However, others are unusually tall, like the Watusi tribe of East Africa, where many of the men are up to 7 feet tall. In Europe, the Dutch are tall and unusually well proportioned, and the Montenegrins in the mountainous area of the Balkan Peninsula are taller still, with many men well over 6 feet tall and some over 7 feet, and many women are over 6 feet tall as well. Physical anthropologists have, they believe, identified a species of prehistoric man that they have named Heidelberg man. It has been theorized that some prehistoric human species may simply be different races, but the same species as modern man. To support neo-Darwinism, as it's known, scientists had to discover supposedly primitive species ancestral to us and related to other primates. Even the anthropologists admit that they can't always be sure if a specimen is Heidelberg man, Homo erectus, or Neanderthal man. Heidelberg people tended to be large and had an average brain size of 1,250 cubic centimeters compared to modern man's 1,400 cubic centimeter average, and most were no taller than modern people. But anthropologists believe that they have identified a South African subgroup with men often over 7 feet tall. So it does seem that actual races of giants have lived in the past. There are also rumors of giant human remains in places as diverse as Sardinia in the Mediterranean and Nan Madol in the Southwest Pacific. However, most of the confirmed specimens come from the Americas. Many of these were found and reported by scientists with good reputations, and others found by laymen and later examined on site by reputable researchers, while others were sent to museums. The number of these remains is staggering. Many of these finds are documented by Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman in Giants on Record, in addition to the skeletons that have been unearthed. Early and submodern European explorers reported giants in places like Tierra del Fuego. This is even more mysterious when we remember that, on average, Amerindians, and especially those in Mexico and in Central and South America, tended to be shorter than most Europeans. In North America, there have been a couple of unverified claims of 14-foot skeletons, but most of the giants reported range from around 6 foot 6 to well over 7 feet, with some 8 and 9 footers and a very few of 10 to 12 feet. They have been found everywhere, and many of these were found in the mounds built by several ancient Amerindian civilizations, but most were in the eastern and southeastern United States and along the Mississippi and Ohio river valleys. Vieira and Newman have documented some 1,000 finds in the US and 500 more in other parts of the world. In addition to the finds and the reports of early explorers, many of the Amerindians had legends of giants. The Cherokee, for example, told of peaceful giants who came from somewhere in the west and lived among them for a time. There were also tales from Nevada of red-haired giants whom they wiped out, and there are unverified claims by European settlers in the region of skeletons up to 9.5 feet tall. In 1519, Spanish explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pineda reported entire villages of living giants near the mouth of the Mississippi. Magellan and Sir Francis Drake both reported giants up to 7.5 feet tall in Patagonia. An image of Dr. Frederick Cook in Patagonia in 1897 shows the 5'9" tall explorer flanked by two Patagonian men about 6'10" tall. An estimated 7-foot human skeleton was found in Ohio's mysterious Serpent Mound, located in what remains of an ancient asteroid crater. Giant tools and weapons have been found in other Ohio mounds, although skeptics claim that they were merely ceremonial. This may or may not be true, but some of them allegedly show signs of wear, as if they had actually been used by people of great strength. There were also claims of an 11-foot skeleton in Michigan, found in 1894, and a 10-footer in Akron, Ohio in 1899. Elongated skulls were formed in Virginia. In 1937, researchers found a skull with a 2,100 cubic centimeter brain capacity in Virginia. Even the Smithsonian Annual Report of 1873 admitted the discovery of a 36-inch diameter human skull in Illinois. Many of the giant skeletons had unusually thick bones, which, as many have pointed out, would have been necessary for true giants to be strong and healthy. There have also been reports of 7- and 8-foot human skeletons in shell mounds in Florida and on California's Channel Islands, and also in Hawaii. Archaeologist Byron Cummings of the University of Arizona reported 7-footers found in Sonora, Mexico in 1934. Some, but not all, of the giant skulls had double rows of teeth. It's not hard to figure out that this would confer no benefits, but in fact be a harmful mutation, likely to encourage tooth decay. In 1903, the curator of the Division of Physical Anthropology was a member of the racist eugenics movement, and for years refused to consider that anyone had lived in the Americas before 2000 BP, before the present. To his credit, though, he eventually accepted the evidence that Folsom Spear points dated back to 10,000 BC or earlier. Another institution, the Rockefeller Foundation, was involved in archaeological digs and the study of prehistoric people, but its officials admitted that their main goal was to learn how to control people. The same can be said of the Carnegie Institution, controlled by dogmatic proponents of neo-Darwinism. Many have heard the story of geologist Virginia Steen McIntyre, who dared to date Mexican stone tools at 250 to 300,000 BP. Her career was ruined and her conclusions never taken seriously. The University of California at Berkeley tried to stop the broadcasting of the NBC special The Mysterious Origins of Man, and would not allow researcher Michael Cremo to see apparently very ancient artifacts from California which they kept hidden from the public. But if there were one or more actual races of giants in prehistoric times, where did they come from? Certainly multiple races would likely have originated from multiple points of origin, and since giants seem to have been most numerous in the Americas, it's possible that some of them originated here. But there is something else. Plato never comments on the size or the physical appearance of the Atlanteans. Could at least some of them have been giants? Could Atlantis have been an empire of people living on many islands in and around the Atlantic and Caribbean, as well as some colonies on the mainland of North and South America, and perhaps southwest Spain and parts of North Africa? Were their scattered homelands submerged by the rise in sea levels at the end of the last ice age? In North America, the mound builder cultures seem to have originated near the mouth of the Mississippi and spread northeast and west along that river and its tributaries, mainly the Ohio River. Meanwhile, a somewhat similar culture is now known to have existed in Amazonia and other parts of tropical South America, also building mounds as well as roads and canals. They even traded with the people of Mexico, supplying them with the mica geologists have identified its South American origin used in their pyramids and temples. So could both the mound builder and the Amazonian cultures have come from the Atlantis, with survivors settling the coasts and traveling up the river systems? Could they have been giants? Did they teach the arts of civilization to people already in the Americas and perhaps dominate some tribes? We can speculate, but much remains a mystery. The reason for all this secrecy concerning various giants that once lived on Earth could simply be that it would cause academics to readdress Darwin's theory of evolution and put us back in the questionable corner, where did we come from? After all, there are even debates in regards to how long modern man has actually been around on Earth. One of the greatest archaeological mysteries is the discovery of giant skeletons in 3 western states: California, Arizona, and Nevada. The huge remains found in large stone sarcophagus, caves, and Pueblo burial grounds predate the Native Americans in many cases. Some tribes worshipped men of huge stature who inhabited the region before they arrived. Who were these giants? When did they exist? What happened to them? In 1833, soldiers uncovered a particular level of gravel and stone cement in Lompoc Rancho near Point Conception, California. When the workers broke through it, they were startled to find the skeleton of a 12-foot-long man. This giant had been buried in a massive stone coffin. On closer inspection, the men found that the giant possessed a double row of both upper and lower teeth. Relics buried with the skeleton included several huge stone axes and 2 giant spears. More bones of a giant were excavated on Santa Catalina Island. Accompanying the man were the charred remains of a small species of elephant, which he evidently had roasted. Incidentally, the big guy ate that elephant with a double row of choppers, both upper and lower. But what is the significance of these elephant remains? Remarkably, it suggests that the giant lived there at least 10,000 years ago, the age at which American mammoths became extinct. Elsewhere on Santa Rosa Island, someone found a skeleton of a giant which not only had double rows of teeth, but also artifacts identical to those found at Lompoc Rancho, such as massive stone axes and enormous spears. Similarly, on Santa Cruz Island, another giant skeleton was found. This one was sent to the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. However, it was promptly misplaced. Furthermore, at Santa Barbara, a cave full of giant skeletons was found. Unfortunately, the entrance to the cave was sealed shut before proper excavation could be conducted. In 1895, the Chicago Record reported that fossilized remains of men and women who had been 8 to 9 feet tall were found in California. More importantly, their bones were found in the same rock layer as those of extinct mammoths, like the bones from Santa Catalina. Earlier in 1891, Crittenden, Arizona, workers were excavating the remains of an old building when they came across an enormous stone sarcophagus at a depth of 8 feet. When archaeologists opened the tomb in front of a large, curious crowd which had gathered, the scientists found a huge mummy case which had been built with blocks of red rose granite. When it was broken open, everyone was disappointed to see only a handful of dust, all that remained of an ancient giant whom the ages had pulverized. Everybody agreed that it had taken a long time for a skeleton to dissolve into dust, particularly in the dry desert. This fact would make the giant much older than the California specimens whose skeletons were found intact. Although not a single bone or artifact was found, the inside of the mummy case had been carved in a likeness of the body, a characteristic reminiscent of Egyptian sarcophagus. According to the carving and the size of the enormous container, the body had once measured 12 feet in length and had 6 toes on each foot. Now the story moves into Nevada, the last state where numerous giant remains have been found. In 1871, Charles Billinger, a writer for the Los Angeles Times, wrote an article in which he described giants found in a cave near Lovelock, Nevada. His article went as follows. In 1812, James Hart and David Push uncovered the first of many giant remains whilst digging manure in the Lovelock Cave. These mummies were red-headed and averaged 6 to 7 feet in height, a slightly shorter version of the 8 to 12 feet footers found elsewhere. Many archaeologists and anthropologists have since come to examine the smoke-stained cave, which is located 22 miles from the town of Lovelock. Attempts to date the remains have resulted in ages ranging from 3000 BC to 1850 AD. The caves were occupied for nearly 500 years, but no artifacts or skeletons except those of the giants have been found. The giants resided in this cave for many centuries until the Puyallup Indians, distressed by the giants' bad habits, annihilated them. What provoked this sudden annihilation? Sarah Winnemucca, a direct descendant of Chief Truckee, the last king of the Paiutes, wrote a book of history and legend of the Paiutes. These stories may help to unravel the mystery. One story claimed that about 100 years before her birth, there was another race sharing the Paiute homeland. This race was called the Sidiokas, which in the Paiute language means man-eaters or cannibals. These giant cannibals had flaming red hair. For sport, they would dig traps in well-traveled trails and wait for some unsuspecting Paiute to fall to his death. Then they would have a grand feast. Needless to say, these actions did not make for friendly relations, and war soon broke out between the two tribes. In the midst of a battle, the giants would leap from behind cover, grab Paiute arrows in mid-flight, and then fire them back at the opposition from their own bows. Unfortunately for the giants, they were greatly outnumbered, so the war did not last long. Later, in an attempt to escape from the Paiutes, the Sidiokas constructed large canoes from tule fibers and lived on Humboldt Lake. When their supplies ran out, they hid in the Lovelock Cave. The Paiutes surrounded the entrance to the cave and killed the giants when they ventured out at night in search of water. This proved to be slow work, so the Paiutes stuffed the cave entrance with wood and set it on fire, thereby smothering all those within and bringing about a quick end to the war. And with that, this tribe of brave, strong and intelligent giants that apparently lived in one region for 5,000 years had been exterminated by the migratory Paiutes in about 1750. During the 3-year war, the entire population of giants were killed, which was estimated by the Paiutes to number 2,600. Annie Bill, a 68-year-old resident of Lovelock and a niece of Sarah Winnemucca, testifies that her grandparents saw the giants and had described them as having long faces and white-skinned. Nowadays, only 300 Paiutes still survive in the Lovelock area. They claim to have always known that remains would be found in the cave. In fact, they were often told white settlers what the cave contained, but of course they were laughed at. After years of ridicule, the Paiute finally kept the knowledge to themselves, at least until they were vindicated by modern science. Other remnants of the giants include relics that have survived, kept by members of the tribe for many years. Winnemucca claimed, "I have some of their hair, which has been handed down from father to son. I have a dress, which has been in our family for many years, trimmed with reddish hair." For further physical evidence, we turn to Stoker's Museum in nearby Winnemucca. The proprietor, Clarence Stoker, a Lovelock native, has participated in several excavations of the cave. His museum is stocked with arrowheads, nets and baskets, in addition to a skull of one of the giants. His prize artifact is a calendar stone from the cave, marked with 52 indicators on the inside of the stone for the weeks, 365 on the outside for days. Despite these findings, the mystery remains. What were the origins of these giants? Where did they come from? One explanation, as offered by Stoker, suggested they were descendants of Egyptians who sailed to America hundreds of years ago. Stoker backed up this by continuing, "Didn't Thor Heyerdahl just prove the possibility that Egyptians may have sailed to America as long as 4,000 years ago on reed rafts? This indeed is the case. Furthermore, giants who colonized Ecuador 4,000 years ago arrived on reed rafts. Also, the Sidiokas sailed on Humboldt Lake in reed canoes they built." Although hundreds of mummies and tons of artifacts have been recovered from the cave, there are a few positive indications of Egyptian influence. However, the giants could easily have retained their cultural heritage and knowledge while their original implements quickly wore out. In explaining the mummies, which should only have been skeletons, anthropologist Robert F. Heiser of the University of Southern California commented, "Conditions of extreme dryness in the cave, as in the pyramids of Egypt, have preserved the archaeological material in remarkable good fashion." In fairness, it should be stated that Mr. Heiser did not infer a connection between Egypt and the Lovelock giants, but only a slight comparison. It seems the mystery of the giants will continue. We may hypothesize that they arrived in the West about 3,000 years ago from either South America or Egypt, and that they were eventually destroyed by Native Americans. Unfortunately, that is all the knowledge we have currently obtained. Perhaps one of America's greatest archaeological mysteries will remain just that, a mystery. though fortunately that uncertainty isn't stopping the continuing search. The Bible contains many stories of races of giants which once existed on Earth. Giants also appear in one form or another in the folklore, myths and legends of most countries. Additionally, there are recent cases of the actual remains of giants being discovered, like the Cardiff giant of New York, and the bones of 8-foot-tall prehistoric beings discovered in West Virginia, which suggest to some that a race of giants may once have roamed the Earth. Giants in myth and on Earth. In ancient myths, giants are often seen as ancestors to the gods, but also their unrelenting enemies who are ultimately defeated by them. The folklore of ancient places has many associations with supernatural creatures who may once have been worshipped as gods. Ancient tombs and stone circles are often said to be inhabited by fairies, built by giants or the devil, haunted by ghosts, guarded by dragons, visited by spectral black dogs, or cursed by witches. Although scientists believe these giants of myth and legend to grow to 20 feet or more have no basis in reality, one or two researchers believe that a race of giants may once have existed on Earth. According to science, some extraordinary exceptions amongst Homo sapiens have existed. They are usually the result of hormonal disorders, and there is no evidence that hominins ever got taller than we are today. The tallest person ever measured was Robert Wadlow, also known as the Alton Giant and the Giant of Illinois, who stood 8 feet 11 inches tall. Wadlow died at the age of just 22 in 1940. An early death is common for those suffering from giantism, as their weight and size puts constant strain on the heart and skeletal system. Giants in America. Apparent evidence of giants in America has a long history. The Massachusetts Puritan minister Cotton Mather believed that mastodon fossils found near Albany, New York in 1705 were those of giants who had died in Noah's flood. He wrote, "The giants that once groaned under the waters are now under the earth, and their dead bones are lively proofs of the Mosaic history." Almost 100 years later, Connecticut farmer Pliny Moody discovered large three-toed tracks in a sandstone ridge on his land. The local pastor told him they were made by Noah's raven, which had rested on that ledge and probably slept there before resuming the dangerous journey back to the ark. The same ministers later reasoned that dinosaur bones found locally were probably the remains of giant humans. During the period from the late 1800s all the way up to the 1990s, there were over 1,000 reports of giant-sized human skeleton remains being discovered across North America. Old reports were discovered, particularly from New England, of giant skeletons being unearthed from Native American burial mounds, which supposedly ranged in length from 7 to 10 feet tall. But the most famous of all American giants is the Cardiff giant. The discovery of the Cardiff giant. On the 16th of October 1869, two labourers, Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols, were digging a well behind the barn of William C. Newell in Cardiff, New York, when they hit a solid object 3 feet down. After further digging and clearing away the soil, the pair unearthed a 10-foot-tall petrified man. News of the extraordinary discovery soon spread, and people came from far and wide to see the giant, which was displayed under a tent set up by landowner Newell, who charged 50 cents for admission. During the first week alone, around 2,500 people came to visit the strange exhibition. The area around Cardiff was known for its fossil deposits, so initially it was thought that the giant could have been an ancient ancestor of the local Onondaga people, who had perhaps been petrified by the waters of a nearby swamp. Whatever it was, the Cardiff giant caused wonder and excitement in all who saw it. Scholar Michael Petit writes, "Many spectators understood the giant within the framework of wonder, in which extraordinary objects that seemed to transcend the laws of nature were valued and deemed authentic for precisely that reason. Across the social spectrum, from farmers who paid 50 cents to view the statue where it lay, to the transcendentalist philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson, who viewed the giant at an exhibition in Boston, expressions of wonder were heard." Even the experts were impressed by the discovery, though most believed it was an ancient statue rather than a petrified man. New York State geologist James Hall and Rochester University professor Henry Ward believed this to be the case, with Hall describing it as the most remarkable object yet brought to light in our country. Soon afterwards, Newell thought it best to cash in on all the publicity and sold a 3/4 stake in the giant to a syndicate of businessmen led by a David Hannum, receiving a payment of $23,000, about $500,000 in today's money. On the 5th of November 1869, the syndicate had the giant dug up and shipped to Syracuse. The pair then took the giant on the road and exhibited it to thousands of paying spectators in Syracuse and Albany. But all this added publicity brought some unwanted attention for the owners. A mining engineer who saw the giant close up remarked that the gypsum it appeared to be made from would have deteriorated quickly in the wet soil of Newell's farm. Even worse was to follow when on the 25th of November, well-known Yale paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh saw the giant and immediately pronounced it of very recent origin and a most decided humbug. I'm surprised that any scientific observers should not have at least once detected the unmistakable evidence against its antiquity. Despite this, the giant soon came to the attention of the American showman P.T. Barnum, who did not appear at all bothered by the doubts about its origin and offered to buy it from them for a huge sum. In his 1890 book, Funny Stories, he remarked, "One thing was certain, it was a great attraction, visited by hundreds of people daily, and I thought that it's so great a curiosity it should be exhibited under proper management in New York City. I therefore approached the proprietors, and I said I will give you $50,000 for your Cardiff giant as it is." But the syndicate declined the offer, so Barnum decided to make an exact copy of the giant and arrange for its copy to be exhibited at a museum in New York. According to Barnum, it was a considerable attraction and drew crowds of visitors, while the original was lumbering away along the North Hudson River, stopping at towns on the way. The syndicate tried to bring an injunction against Barnum, but the judge told them, "Bring your giant here, and if he swears to his own genuineness as a bona fide petrifaction, you shall have the injunction you ask for." Unable to do this, the businessmen were at a loss what to do, but their problem was soon solved by a shocking revelation. The real origins of the giant. On the 10th of December, George Hull, a businessman from Binghamton, New York, confessed to the press that he had created the Cardiff giant. On February 2, 1870, the Chicago Tribune published an expose on the Cardiff giant that included confessions from the masons who had worked on it. But it wasn't a hoax perpetrated just for fun, as many were in the late 19th century North America. Hull, an atheist, worked as a tobacconist in Binghamton, New York in 1867. He visited Ackley, Iowa for business, and while there had an extended discussion with a traveling Methodist revivalist preacher called Reverend Turk. The pair argued over the biblical passage from Genesis, which states there were giants in the earth in those days. The preacher insisted that everything in the Bible, including that phrase, should be taken literally. Hull disagreed vehemently, but Ackley's extreme opinion provided him with the inspiration he needed for his hoax. It took Hull over 2.5 years and cost him around $2,600 to make the Cardiff giant from a 5-ton, 4.5 metric tons, block of gypsum he had quarried in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Hull searched far and wide for the right burial location for the giant, eventually settling on Cardiff, New York, about 60 miles from Hull's home in Binghamton. Hull's cousin was none other than William Newell, and it was his farm that Hull used for the burial spot. It was Hull and Newell who had hired the two workers to dig a well at the farm, instructing them exactly where to dig. The Cardiff hoax seemed to have worked so well as people wanted it to be real. Many at the time believed it to be genuine, partly because its existence appeared to confirm the literal truth of biblical statements about giants roaming the earth. Ken Feder, author of the 2001 book Frauds, Myths and Mysteries, believes this to be the case, though he thinks other factors were at work. He said, "The most obvious explanation is that the Cardiff giant confirmed biblical stories of giants. Then there were folks who probably knew better, the smart businessman in Syracuse, they saw that people were coming in to see the giant using hotel space and buying food. Does the mythology of the Wandjina tribes in Australia offer proof of the ancient astronaut theory? Creation stories about sky beings from the clouds and cave paintings that look like typical grey aliens of our modern world have some people convinced this is very much the case. Could there be more truth to the notion that extraterrestrials landed in what we recognise today as Australia and sparked the Wandjina tribes? And were these extraterrestrials the gods in the creation stories and myths of these indigenous people? The three Wandjina tribes, the Wurrara, the Nagarinyin, and the Wunnabul, had a history that went back thousands and thousands of years, and was one that was uncontaminated by the outside world until the late 18th century, when the arrival of European explorers on the shores of Australia occurred. And perhaps because of this, the creation stories and legends of the Wandjina are particularly thought-provoking. Without a doubt, one of the most compelling reasons to contemplate whether the tribe's roots go back to extraterrestrial contact in ancient times is some of the cave paintings that reside in the Western Kimberley region of northwestern Australia. This artwork is said to date back at least 4,000 years, if not earlier. The similarities between these figures painted somewhere around 2000 BC are undeniably similar to how we would perceive a grey alien being in the modern world. They clearly depict, for example, a head larger than their frame would suggest, as well as a pale, white-grey skin and larger black eyes. Did creatures such as these visit the ancestors of the Wandjina tribe thousands of years ago? While the depictions could be nothing but coincidence, we have to accept that these ancient people would have drawn exactly what they saw. Were the people drawing what we would recognize as a grey alien in the modern world? We should note that perhaps researchers as well as members of the Wandjina people themselves reject the notion that these cave paintings represent alien entities, and instead claim they are simply representations of nature and the natural world their ancestors were surrounded with. It isn't merely the artwork, however. Many of their creation stories are similarly thought-provoking. For example, the first Wandjina people were said to be sky beings or spirits from the clouds, who came to Earth from elsewhere in the Milky Way. Ultimately, they created Earth and all life, both animal and plant life, before eventually returning to their cosmic home elsewhere in the galaxy. Before leaving, though, they would teach humans the secrets of the arts, science, astronomy, and agriculture. Clearly, all of these aspects of the creation stories of the Wandjina people resonate almost perfectly with multiple other civilizations from around the world. Could this suggest that the legends of the Anunnaki, extraterrestrials who came to Earth millions of years ago, are the origins of these multiple creation stories, each one spawned as these alien colonizers spread ever outward, bringing their teachings to those who they found on the way? With these suggestions of alien connections to the Wandjina people, it's probably worth examining the legends of the supreme deity Jama and his apparent use of a flying machine. For example, in one location where this advanced vehicle arrived and left from, there was a baldness of the surrounding rock and trees that had severely damaged bark. What's more, when this vehicle came and went, it brought with it a monstrously loud noise. It's clear even to a skeptic that from a modern perspective, this could very well be describing a nuts and bolts aircraft, and a highly advanced one at that. And it's also worth recalling that multiple other cultures and civilizations around the world have similar legends of entities arriving from the sky in vehicles, or sometimes depicted as animals that make a brilliant noise upon arrival and whose flames often cause damage to the ground when arriving and leaving. It's also of interest to note that many UFO reports from Australia today feature the detail of a particularly loud noise when they're viewed. Might this suggest that whatever extraterrestrial presence was in this part of the world thousands of years ago still be here today? Could it be, for reasons unknown to us, that Australia is of particular interest and importance to these extraterrestrial visitors, maybe for its location or resources perhaps? It's also worth mentioning the Black Mountains that reside directly east, almost in a straight line on the other side of the country. Not only do these multiple black slabs make up the mountains there, slabs that could very well be the ruined remains of an ancient spaceport, but many pilots who fly over the region experience multiple issues with their navigation equipment. Might these ancient mountains be a further testament to an extraterrestrial presence in Australia in the distant past? What is of further interest to those who believe ancient extraterrestrial contact with the ancestors of the Wandjina people is more reality than myth are recent archaeological discoveries that would appear to corroborate at least certain Wandjina legends. Perhaps the best example would be the discovery of the remains of megafauna in the region. This matches very well the accounts of extraordinary large mammals in the Wandjina legends that state once shared the land with them. What's more, while mainstream scholars suggest that the northwestern parts of Australia were likely populated as far back as 60,000 years ago, the result of migrating peoples from Africa, the remains of objects at some sites in the region, suggest an origin that goes much further back to around 175,000 years at the very least. In fact, some researchers have suggested dates even earlier than that. With this in mind, we should also turn our attention to the work of Professors Alan Wilson and Rebecca Kane. In their paper, The Recent African Genesis of Humans, they would conclude that all human life could be traced back to the African continent somewhere around 200,000 years ago. However, not long after releasing the paper, they would publicly declare they had been wrong in their original conclusions and that their most recent findings suggested that the origins of Homo sapiens go much further back than people had previously thought, sometime around 400,000 years ago. And what's more, these origins began with the Aborigine people of Australia, who arose from two distinctive lineages. Even more conclusive, as far as Wilson and Kane were concerned, is that proof of these origins was not present in just one or two locations, but in at least 10 different sites. There is much to contemplate from Wilson and Kane's conclusions and how it might tie in with the creation stories of not only the Wandjina people, but also others around the world, all of which would appear to stem from one original source, those of the Anunnaki. If we accept that the Anunnaki, as the legends state, created humans by mixing their DNA with the most prominent humanoid on the Earth to create a worker race, might that genetic manipulation program have taken place in what is today Australia? Might Australia essentially have been the Garden of Eden of biblical myth? It is certainly an intriguing speculation. Could Australia have much more of an active involvement in these potential events of the distant past than many might have thought? Was there a possible Anunnaki presence here in this part of the world, and might it be they who influenced the guided of the Wandjina ancestors of the Wandjina tribes? Could the origins of the Wandjina really be extraterrestrial in nature? And do many cave paintings in the northwestern regions of Australia look like grey alien beings, because that is exactly what they are? And might these grey aliens and the Anunnaki be one of the same? And if this is true, what does it mean for other similar creation stories around the world, as well as world history in general? Might such seemingly crazy notions of an extraterrestrial race coming to Earth thousands of years ago and then spawning a global human civilization, one that would in turn spawn the many civilizations of our ancient times, have more accuracy and truth to them than most would even dare to believe? The Nommo are primordial ancestral spirits in Dogon religion and cosmology, though some researchers are convinced that they may in fact be aliens. In one story of the Dogon of West Africa, an ark descended to the ground, bringing advanced amphibious beings known as the Nommo. These beings gave the Dogon advanced information about an invisible companion to the star Sirius, which was extremely heavy and made of a special metal not found on Earth. It would one day be known to astronomers as Sirius B. The Dogon are an ethnic group of around 600,000 people, most of who live in the rocky hills, mountains and plateaus of the Bandiagara Escarpment in the Middle Plateau region of Mali. The ancestors of the Dogon came from the area of Mande in southwest Mali and northeast Guinea that was the center of the 13th century Mali Empire. After the collapse of this empire, the Dogon migrated to their current rocky home. The cliffs and difficult terrain where the Dogon settled offered effective protection from raids by slave traders coming from the desert, though they also resulted in the isolation of communities. When Mali became a part of French West Africa in the 1890s, the slave raids ended, and the Dogon were able to expand into the plains around the plateau. Unfortunately, this migration separated the Dogon from their religious sites, making room for Islam and Christianity. But the Dogon are still known for their intricate cosmology and extraordinary rituals that go with it. Their mask dances are now tourist attractions. Indeed, after a mask has been used in these ritualist celebrations, it is no longer considered sacred and is often sold to tourists. Dogon religion is devoted mainly to worshipping the ancestors and the spirits they encountered when they migrated across the western Sudan. For every 60 years, the Dogon perform a religious ceremony called the Sigwi, corresponding to the duration of the life of the first Dogon ancestor. The ceremony occurs when the star Sirius appears between two mountain peaks and is celebrated over 7 years, during which time the great mask is carved from a single piece of wood. These masks are incredibly tall and symbolically complex, and their elaborate dance reenacts the creation of the Dogon culture. This and all Dogon ceremonies are organized by members of the Awa, a male initiation society with important ritual and political roles within the Dogon society. Our society members are also responsible for the creation and performance of the masks, all of which portray the face as a rectangular box with deeply hollowed channels for the eyes. Sirius, also known as the Dog Star in the constellation Canis Major, is the brightest star in the night sky. The bright part of the binary is a blue-white star, 25.4 times as luminous as the Sun. Sirius was known as Sothis to the ancient Egyptians, who knew that it made its first heliacal rising, rose just before sunrise, of the year at around the time of the annual floods were beginning in the Nile Delta. In ancient Rome and Greece, the hottest part of the year was connected with the heliacal rising of the Dog Star, an association that remains in the expression Dog Days. That Sirius as a binary star was first reported by the German astronomer Friedrich Wilhelm Bessel in 1844. The companion was first seen in 1862 by Alvan Clark, an American astronomer and telescope maker, and came as a complete surprise to astronomers. Sirius B is 10,000 times dimmer than Sirius. Consequently, it's extremely difficult to see from Earth. In fact, astronomers were not able to estimate its mass until 2005, when they were able to use data from the Hubble Space Telescope. From 1931 to 1956, French anthropologist Marcel Gréal and his student Germaine Detelen worked in Mali and lived among the Dogon, mainly by talking to a blind hunter named Ogotemeli. They found that some elements of the tribe's mythology were similar to that of ancient Egypt, especially the importance of Sirius in their traditions. The pair also discovered that the Dogon possessed impressive knowledge of certain aspects of modern astronomy. This knowledge included the belief that the Earth and other planets rotate on their axis and orbit the Sun, that Jupiter possesses 4 moons, and that Saturn is surrounded by a ring. Although this is impressive, such information can be obtained without modern technology, as can be seen by the work of ancient Greek astronomers and Copernicus. But it's not this knowledge that is the source of the controversy surrounding the Dogon. The cause of the debate was the claim that Ogotemeli told the anthropologist that the Dogon believed that Sirius, in their language Sigutolu, has a dark, invisible companion with a 50-year elliptical orbit. This companion is extremely heavy and made of a special metal not found on Earth. In other words, Sirius B. Apparently around 15% of all Dogon adult males were initiated into the Sirius lore. But how could a remote people who lacked any kind of astronomical device obtain such information about an invisible star? Griel first published this extraordinary data on the Dogon in 1948 and included it in a representation of the Sirius B system drawn by Ogo Tomeli. One theory to explain the advanced astronomical knowledge of the Dogon was put forward by author Robert Temple in his book The Sirius Mystery, first published in 1976. An advertisement for its second 1998 edition, called The Sirius Mystery: New Scientific Evidence of Alien Contact 5,000 Years Ago, stated Temple's extreme hypothesis about the Dogon and Sirius B. He said, "Convincing evidence that the Egyptian, Sumerian and Dogon civilizations were founded by aliens from the Sirius star system who are now ready to return. New scientific evidence that solidifies the hypothesis that the KGB, CIA and NASA attempted to suppress. An awe-inspiring work of research that calls for a profound reappraisal of our role in the universe." The Sirius Mystery in 1976 set the world abuzz with talk of an extraterrestrial origin to human civilization and triggered a 15-year persecution campaign against Robert Temple by the KGB, CIA and NASA and other government agencies. Undaunted, however, Temple is back with 140 pages of new scientific evidence that makes his hypothesis more compelling than ever. Many authors have speculated on the subject of extraterrestrial contact, but never before has such detailed evidence been presented. Temple applies his in-depth knowledge of ancient history, mythology, Pythagorean physics, chaos theory, and Greek to a close examination of the measurements of the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was built to align directly with the star Sirius. He concludes that the alien civilization of Sirius and our own civilization are part of the same harmonic system and are destined to function and resonate together. His findings warrant a profound reappraisal of our role in the universe. Temple's book also states that thousands of years ago an ark descended to the ground with great noise and in a swirling wind and brought amphibious alien beings known as the Nommo to the Dogon. It was these beings who told the tribesmen about Sirius B. The Dogon were also told that the Nommo lived on a planet that orbits another star in the Sirius system. This account follows Dogon mythology fairly closely. In Dogon tradition, Nommo was the creator spirit who emerged with a female twin and several more pairs of Nommo from the cosmic egg Amma. The first Dogon primordial ancestors were thus bisexual water gods created in heaven by Amma and descended from heaven to earth in an ark. Many scientists reacted to Temple's claims by saying that the advanced knowledge about Sirius probably came from Western visitors who discussed astronomy with the Dogon priests. The priests then added this new information to their older traditions. They also pointed out that Grail was an amateur astronomer and could well have used his knowledge to rationalize the rather disorganized Dogon traditions that even tribal members could not agree on. In 1995, two French researchers, Daniel Benest and J.L. Duvent, had an article published in the journal Astronomy and Astrophysics entitled "Is Sirius a Triple Star?", which suggested that there was a small third star in the Sirius system. They believe the star may be a type known as a red dwarf and probably has only about 0.5 the mass of Sirius B. Some researchers have wondered, could this newly discovered star be the home of the Nommo?